like to introduce Alex Weiser and Ben Kaplan. Alex, as you've known from reading the copious email blasts, is the composer of the Great Dictionary of the Yiddish Language, and Ben is the librettist. Ben Kaplan is the librettist for this opera. It's at least the second opera that they've created together. And I know them both because I have been a student of Yiddish language at YIVO. And Alex and Ben are both integral members of the staff at YIVO, responsible respectively. Alex is the director of public programming, and Ben is the director of education. I've interfaced with Ben for the most part, and with great pleasure. Ben is a large part of what keeps us coming back. And when I learned that they had created this new opera, first of all, I was very eager to hear it, and they provided me with a link, which you also have on the emails, to the entire premiere recording of the opera in May 2024. And I believe, without disclosing details that I'm not privy to and not allowed to tell you, there's a possibility that this will be produced full scale in the foreseeable future. And we hope to take the transcript of an interview that I've alluded to in the emails that we recorded in January, plus, insights from our meeting today, and see if we can get a article out in the Yiddishist press somewhere to honor this work that they've done together and explore it more deeply. So I'm tremendously pleased to have had an acceptance of our invitation from Alex and Ben. And I'll also add that they're going to present the opera, I believe, with excerpts and conversation between them to give us a deeper dive into the opera than we would get just by ourselves listening to the recording. And this recording that we're making today, at least their presentation part of it, will go up. It will be our first YouTube presentation for the Yiddish Shmoozers in translation. And we do have the website, and we do have a site we do have a channel on YouTube, and I'll be sending that information to people as soon as it's up. And I'll also say that this is, if not to the day, to the month, and time of year, the 7th anniversary of the Yiddish Shmoozers in translation. We started as an in-person book group, and we've developed to an online presence, and we look forward to growing more. So with that, Alex and Ben, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your materials all through this process, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. My name's Alex Weiser.
And I'm Ben Kaplan.
So we wrote an opera about the Great Dictionary of the Yiddish Language, which is an unfinished Yiddish dictionary that was worked on in New York City after the Holocaust by linguist Udo Mark, with some others, but we really kind of focus on Mark as the leader of the project. Our opera is based on the true story of Udo Mark and his heroic efforts over about 25 years to document, preserve, and in some instances, try to reinvent the Yiddish language in the pages of this impossibly comprehensive dictionary that he had the ambition to create.
So in this operatic telling, Mark is haunted by 3 Alephs, Kometz, Pasach, and Stummer, 3 divine messengers of the Yiddish language who compel him to breathe new life into Yiddish. So we just want to say before we start a big thank you to Gelya Frank and to all of you at Yiddish Shmoozers for hosting us for this program. Today we're going to tell you a bit about the opera and play a variety of excerpts from a concert performance of the show from last May, as Gelya mentioned.
So in the opera, when we first meet Yudomark, we see him having a vision. And it's a vision which recalls the biblical prophet Ezekiel's vision of the Valley of the Dry Bones, in which Ezekiel sees a valley filled with the skeletons of Jews who are long deceased. But through speaking prophecy over these skeletons, Ezekiel is able to bring them back to life. In our opera, in the wake of the Holocaust and the destruction of the majority of Yiddish-speaking Jews, Yudomark, in his vision, sees the language, the Yiddish language, itself as dry, crumbling dust. And he receives a prophetic commission to do something about it from three divine messengers who are, as Ben alluded to, the three Alepphs of the Yiddish language, Kometz, Pasach, and Stummer.
After receiving his prophetic calling from the Alephs to save the Yiddish language, we hear Mark sing his first aria, Gather Every Spark, in which he lays out his plan to save the Yiddish language by gathering every word into a comprehensive dictionary.
Ponet, Pasech, Stummer, the three Alephs of the Yiddish language. Sammel die dosige Wörter, collect these words, every Yiddish word, for that we'd need a dictionary. It must contain every word, the words we speak today, the words we lost to history, and new words for the future. We need definitions, citations, etymologies. Gather every spark, every flash of wisdom, the words of rabbis, peddlers, thieves, the words of mothers, teachers, friends, the words of children. Every word deserves to be remembered. Gather every spark, every lost expression, the words of Kiev, Riga, Lodz, the words of markets, kitchens, stores, the words of shtetls. Every word preserves a piece of history. As long as I have breath, I will collect every word, define their meanings, give voice to the dead, and save Yiddish with these words as sparks we can reignite our flame.
In a great contrast with these opening scenes of expansive prophecy, hope, and ambition, in the next scene, we find Udelmark working at the cramped offices of YIVO, a National Academy and Library of Congress for the Yiddish language located in New York City, as he races against time to make the dictionary and struggles with the everyday problems of needing more staff, space, and money to realize his vision.
This office is too small.
This is all the YIVO can provide.
I have been here 6 years, and in that time alone, we have discovered 200,000 words. I need more room for definitions, citations, etymologies. I can't do the work here There are too many words.
Look, you need to speak to Max Weinreich. But he is very busy.
He hasn't looked once at this draft. How busy could he be?
Yivo publishes a lot.
It's not enough to write about our past. We must also see a future.
You could find an office somewhere else.
And risk my reputation. Evo is the only center for Yiddish academia. No, I'm staying right here. I need the Evo logo on this book, on its spine, on its cover. Without that logo, this project fails. Without Evo, my work is dust.
Yours is not the only project in this building. He'll speak to you when he can.
No, I will see him now.
Mark isn't the only Yiddish linguist racing against time to save Yiddish. And Max Weinreich, YIVO's academic director, is not going to be happy about the dictionary's progress.
This draft is a mess.
It's an Oxford, not a Webster.
We'll lend you to mark that office, stretching our resources, and this is how he repays us.
Think of what this could do for Yiddish. How impressive it would be to have a dictionary so expensive.
Impressive. If he continues work like this, he'll never finish. And look, he broke with the Tacones. How can I put the Evo logo on a book that breaks with the Evos, spelling and rules?
It's a slight deviation.
It's an embarrassment. This stamp, this logo, it has meaning. words at a time of strength, if we change them now when Yiddish is receding. If I give our stamp to a book that breaks without a corner, this logo means nothing.
But Mark is capturing the great diversity of Yiddish.
Mark is wrong. A scholar should work within a framework for how a language should be, without the standard rules of spelling and grammar. We live in chaos, and he's included too many words.
There are so many words already lost.
You can't save them all. Words fall along the way. That is history.
But you can try to save.
Don't talk to me about saving. You weren't there in Vilna. You Americans don't know how poor we were. Our first office was my apartment. You don't know how hard we fought us to get here. What it takes to do the work, and how little time we have. In Vilna, we collected strands of Yiddish in treasured books, remembered stories, in assembled manuscripts. We poured through these pages and shined a light on Jewish life. In Vilna we created that Agones, the only standard Yiddish spelling in 1,000 vital years. We gathered our scholars and forged a new linguistic path. We brought order to our language, preserved our cherished past. We united Yiddish-speaking Jews, raised up our civilization. We showed the world that Yiddish deserves respect and dignity. In New York, we're confronting our destruction. culture overlooked. We rescue the remnants to share our riches with the must always follow the rules we have established. And this book, it's just too big and too unwieldy. We'll all die before it's done.
So Mark and Weinreich are also friends and colleagues who have devoted their lives to their respective philosophies. Who is right and who is wrong? The argument runs deep for the two main characters of this opera. Mark is the prophet par excellence, raging against the storm of history, refusing to compromise on his expansive vision for the dictionary and his own very slightly different spelling system. Max Weinreich is the high priest to his prophet, the practical bureaucrat seeking to bring order, clarity, and efficiency to their work, and to uphold Yivo's standard spelling rules, known as the takones.
In scenes that we aren't going to see tonight, we see Weinreich and Mark argue over Mark's choices. We see Weinreich refuse to give Yivo's logo to the first volume of this dictionary. And we see Mark's devastation when Weinreich, his foil, dies while the work still lays incomplete. Mark, bereft of his nemesis, decides to move to Israel. He thinks that it'll be a better home for the project. In the scene we're going to see next, we watch as Mark, in his Jerusalem apartment, is visited by the ghost of Max Weinreich, and the two seek posthumous reconciliation.
This place is a mess.
Max!
How do you get anything done here?
I have discovered 200,000 words. I'm drowning in definitions, citations, etymologies. I've done a lot these years you've been dead.
This is more than you can do alone.
So what? I should quit. I'm not even done with Olive. These cards are all I have left.
You should have listened to me. You chose too many words.
You should have given me the evil logo. On this book, on its spine, on its cover.
You should have listened to me. You should have followed the tacones.
I thought that Israel would be better.
There's nothing for Yiddish here.
I'm not going to finish.
You don't have a choice in this. None of us choose history. I chose to rescue every word. I chose to organize our work. I chose to create for the future. I chose to preserve the past. We chose to fight for Yiddish. We fought despite our loss. The world ignored our work, but we chose a worthy cause. It can't be like this. There must be more room somewhere for Yiddish. Judel, listen to me. Yiddish flows through history.
The opera culminates with a vision of the other side, the celestial chamber, a heavenly Yiddish library where all of Yudelmark's work is safely tended to by the three Alepphs who have inspired his dictionary. Here, amidst shelves that look curiously like the stacks of the Evo, we hear from Stummer Aleph herself about what it feels like to be an Aleph, a Jewish letter witnessing history for millennia, desiring to be saved and to be read.
it's not over.
So those are the excerpts we have for you today. Now we'll be happy to discuss further and answer any questions you might have.
Nahma, I see your hands up.
Yeah, is that how we're going to do it?
Go for it.
My first question is, I could swear I saw this staged or semi-staged a long time ago. Didn't you ever, before you had this concert version? It hasn't changed much, I think. Has it?
We have never staged it. We did some other workshops with shorter excerpts at the 14th.
Maybe that's what I saw.
Yeah, so you may have seen at the 14th Street Y we did a few scenes, but that was also unstaged.
And you had something interesting for the letters at the beginning. You had something visual. That was nice.
When we did the we did the full show with just piano. Now you're bringing it back to me. We did one show at the 14th Street Y with just a few scenes, and then we did another show at the 14th Street Y with the full show but only piano, and it was unstaged. But you're right, we did have a video we played at the beginning to try to bring to life that this idea of rolling
and
around.
I thought at the time that that's one of the few times that when they stick a video into an opera, it's really justified. It's good. It's good to do.
Thank you.
Well, here's one question. Did you set out to make Udelmark the hero and Weinreich the foil?
You could say villain.
Weinreich also, he wanted the dignity of the language.
Yeah.
So it's not so simple that he just was a bureaucrat, but it makes it a stronger libretto, I guess, if you choose one hero.
Absolutely, you're certainly right that there are nuances to who they were as people that is very true to the history and the complexity of the story. For this piece, we were playing around with this notion of we pretty early on thought that Udelmark would be the tenor, and that Weinreich would be the baritone.
It's good.
There's an operatic trope of the baritone as
it's good. It's good. Yeah.
And the hero as the tenor. But yes, there are very interesting elements to their histories that, we took some artistic liberties to bring the story to life, that we couldn't fit in all of those nuances. But also this idea that they kind of clash, but there's a creative tension between them that they're both these giants in the field, and we wanted to show that drama, and that in a way that they, in their friendship and in their antagonism, they're these creative forces that balance each other.
Just to add a little bit to that, so when we started looking at this story to tell it in an operatic form, Udelmark really is the hero. He is the central figure of the story of the Great Dictionary, and Weinreich really was truly his foil, his sparring partner. I think even in his even in the obituary that he writes for Max Weinreich in the foreword, he called I forget what the term is. He referred to this idea that Weinreich was his sparring partner in an intellectual sense, even though he loved him and he had tremendous respect for him. Obviously, they were. And then so in the piece, they're on this trajectory where they're sparring partners, and Weinreich is the one not letting him do what he wants, but they ultimately come to this realization, even after Weinreich dies, though, that they're really fighting the same fight, even though they're kind of doing it from different perspectives. But one other thing I'd like to add about this is that, as Gelya said at the beginning, Ben and I both work at YIVO, and at YIVO, in the broader world of Jewish studies, but especially at YIVO, Max Weinreich is the hero of this field. I mean, he is the biggest figure. And I mean, I at least speak for myself, love Max Weinreich and like have just the utmost respect and admiration for his legacy, that what he left us at YIVO. So it's kind of really fun and interesting to put it on its head and look at it from the perspective of someone who felt really pinned in by him. And when we were doing research for this opera, we read tons of different sources. And one of the sources that we read that I really enjoyed personally is this memoir by this guy named Gershon Weiner, who was a rabbi who moved to Israel, and he fundraised for all sorts of Yiddish causes. And one of the causes that he fundraised for was for this dictionary. And he like loathed Max Weinreich. I mean, and it was so much fun to read his memoir where he has all these terrible things to say about Weinreich because Weinreich is this hero, because we have so much love and admiration for him. It's like, it's just really interesting to hear the other side. It doesn't necessarily sway me over, but it's just like, it's amazing to kind of give it some airtime and to, look at what someone from that perspective might be thinking.
Well, all right, everybody has questions. I just want to ask, I'll ask more questions later, but there's a line in it that's, it must be, Mark says that he has words that could have been said. He has words that aren't said, but that could have been said.
Yeah. So
what does that mean?
So this is based on the history that he takes a very, very expansive view of what should go in the dictionary. So he's using obscure terms, he's using terms from Hebrew, he's using all kinds of scientific terms.
That were all used, presumably.
And,
somebody
and internationalisms. But then he starts to think, well, you can take all these verbal prefixes and you can make, there are theoretical words that could exist technically according to Yiddish grammar could exist, and he adds those words too. And that's why, he gets questioned in the opera, when did a Jew say this word? Because these are...
Yeah, that's what I'm asking, yeah.
Right, but if you talk to folks who are very sympathetic to this maximalist view, they'll say, well, that was a great thing to do because he imagined this expansive view of the language existing, and he had hopes for the language to grow and to develop in ways that he thought that those words should also be there in the dictionary.
I'll just give you an example, and this was a word that we encountered in our research that actually they argued about and ultimately decided to not put in the dictionary because so the word is Avekgeborchitkeit, and Avekgeborchit means like grumbled away. I mean, even that is a kind of obscure word because to combine those things and to say that you need to define them as its own word, not as the constituent parts. Okay, grumbled away. But then Avekgeborchitkeit means the quality of being grumbled away, grumbled away-ness. And so you can understand in English what grumbled awayness. It's not a word, but you could define it, right? Because as a native English speaker, you understand the grumbled awayness. Well, that would be something that has the quality of being grumbled away. Maybe it's sort of, I can't put it into words, but you sort of understand that could be a word, but it's not a word. If you go to the Oxford English Dictionary, grumbled awayness does not have an entry. Those are the kind of words that Mark, no one said those words, but they could have said them. That's the idea.
And is there any indication where otherwise you would put that it's regional or etymological or what? Is there any indication I made this one up?
No. And the term for it in linguistics is that they're possible words. They're like syntactically, when you combine the different parts, it makes sense, but it's just not something that people used. Sometimes words like that are not used and then later become used. So it's, you could sort of understand, like Ben was saying, that if you had this kind of maximalist, optimistic dream for Yiddish, someone might use this word someday. So there might be some context in which it becomes really useful. And, he wanted to save everything. He didn't want any possible, beautiful word to be lost by the wayside.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly too, if when you think about the emotional dimension of this, which is something that I think really drew us to this story, this idea of different ways of responding to immense grief and loss. And so the notion that he would want to create words for people who will not have the opportunity to create words because they perish, or to use words to have the language develop further. I think he saw himself almost not just as a guardian of what was, but what could be had calamity not befallen the Jewish people in this way. So to fight for that future that he would like to see, the kind of reclamation of, or some restoration of cultural elements to the language and to Jewish culture and to Jewish peoplehood. So that really interested us as we were working on the piece.
Yeah, Keith, I see your hands up.
Thank you. Congratulations to both of you on this magnificent questions. Someone said there was going to be a full performance with acting. Will there also be a full orchestra, or are you going to stay with the chamber orchestra?
We're going to stick with this chamber orchestra with this size for both for financial reasons, I mean, which is a really serious concern, because even with a chamber orchestra, I mean, you would not believe how expensive opera is. And we're very much in the midst, without giving too much away, I could just tell you, we're expecting to be able to announce a full production next fall. So just stay tuned. One of the challenges that we're going through is trying to raise the money necessary to do even the most modest, simple version of a full production where people are off book, where we have the small chamber orchestra like what you saw there, where we don't have totally the fanciest lights and costumes and set design and all those things. We're going to do a very simple version of all those things. It's still quite expensive. So one is practical, but another is artistic. And this is a piece we chose to make this piece kind of like streamlined and really taut and to the point. And so it's only 50 minutes long. We only have 5 singers. We really zoom in on just a portion of this story and how we're telling it. And for that reason, the orchestra size kind of matches the number of singers.
Right. It gives an intimate. It adds to the intimacy of the
exactly.
Well, the other thing is when the words were first mentioned of the 3 olives, I thought Stummer is a brand of food that's in New York, isn't it? Stummer's bread or Stummer? No.
I need to check that brand out. I haven't heard of it.
And then what was the other one? Chometz.
Chometz, yeah.
Chometz.
Huh?
Not to be Chometz Aleph, not to be confused with Chometz.
Chometz.
Yeah, similar but different word.
Okay, I got it. Thank you so much again, both of you.
Thank you so much, Keith.
Thank you, Keith.
I see some other questions have been put in the chat. One from Marcia Cohen. Do you have a set designer? Not yet. We're hoping. We have a director who we think we'll be working with, and we're just trying to get her all confirmed and planned, and then we will, with her, pick the rest of the creative team. And Gelya.
What?
I can wait.
There was also a question from Alexis about how much Yiddish is in the opera. So the opera, there are scenes like the opening vision you saw. Anytime there's a kind of mystical vision, it's in Yiddish. So there's a good chunk of the piece that's in Yiddish. And then anytime there's a more quotidian, day-to-day office scene or the humans talking amongst themselves, it's typically in English. And that was by design. We conceived of the piece as having these mystical visions that would take place in Yiddish and having that contrast between the two.
Yeah, so in our piece, Yiddish is the holy tongue. In contrast to, in traditional Jewish life, Lashon Kodesh, the holy tongue, is Hebrew and Aramaic used together, Hebrew and or Aramaic, whereas Yiddish is Mama Lashon. It's the intimate, colloquial, vernacular language. But for us, thinking about the ambitions of these people and how they wanted Yiddish to be, a full language, regal and scholarly, and all of these, qualities. So it's almost like it's actually the language of kings and prophets for, Mark and for Max Weinreich. And so we thought, here would be an interesting place to figure Yiddish as the kind of holy tongue of our piece. And so, we did write it for English speaking audience. So kind of the main world of it is in English. But the holy world of it, the language of the divine messengers of the Alephs, is Yiddish. Gelya, did you had your hand up? Did you have another question?
I have so many questions, and but first come the compliments. One of the things that, first of all, the music is soaring and it touches the soul, and it's a great, great gift to us and a pleasure to hear it. And the text is so accessible in terms of making the stakes for these actors, these historical figures, dramatic and clear. And so I just want to compliment you again and tell you how much I appreciate this work. And I want to also say that it's very interesting that this is a major contribution to Yiddishkeit, I think, in our time in America, and perhaps internationally as it gets better known and performed elsewhere. And I think it's interesting that you talked about Yiddish as Lashon Kodesh in this, as the holy tongue, which I find very, very touching. And when we talked in December in person in New York, you talked about a kind of modesty on your part, that Yiddish isn't I don't believe Yiddish is your native tongue. And it's something that people in the United States who are learning Yiddish or who have learned Yiddish at YIVO, like you have, acquire. And so it has a different kind of status than a native speaker would have. And I think that the opera is so interesting because it negotiates that. And the so it I find myself asking, it's perfectly obvious, how is it that a major contribution to Yiddish is in English? And what does that mean for us at this time and for the kind of work that's being done by Yiddishists to promote Yiddish and to do, in a sense, the work that Yudel Mark was hoping to do and that Max Weinreich did, and yet the English component for us is so important. So do you have any comments about that?
So many comments, Gelya. I think, certainly, even Max Weinreich, there are astonishing quotes from him from the 1940s and 1950s, where this negotiation is happening. This process of assimilation is so strong, and he's, reflecting on American Jewry, and he's thinking about what is the future of Jewish life going to be? And so and I think throughout history, all of Jewish history is a constant negotiation between languages, between the vernacular and the holy language, or the language of prayer, or the language of text. So I think I don't see it as, every moment has its own challenges, I think. And certainly, Alex and I, we both, as we mentioned, work at YIVO. We've been at YIVO for almost a decade at this point. And even if, Yiddish is not one's native language, there's an incredible amount, there's an ocean of richness one can unpack and discover. And there's so many things you can do with the language as you can continue to learn it. So I think for us, I don't want to speak for you, Alex, but I think we both have this, there's this feeling of these are treasures that we can utilize and figure out how we're going to craft the help build the Jewish culture of the future, and we take as much as we can from those treasures. And our challenges are going to be different. In some way, we have more advantages, in some way because of the technology we have, for example, because of the historical perspective, having 50 or 75 years on some of these characters to be able to look back. And in many ways, we don't think some things don't come as easy to us, of course, because they had a different closeness, a different relationship with all of this material. And I think that's just the course of history.
I would just add to that, some or many of you may know Jeffrey Chandler's book, Adventures in Yiddish Land. And in that book, he talks about the idea of post-vernacular Yiddish, the idea that Yiddish in our time, particularly among the non-Haredi community that does not speak Yiddish natively, it is a choice to learn Yiddish. It's a choice to speak Yiddish. It's a choice to engage with Yiddish, because it's no longer, for most of us in the secular world, it's no longer the language that we learned at home. It's no longer our vernacular language or our mamalosha. It's no longer our mother tongue. And considering that, we have therefore a different relationship with it. It becomes, by virtue of the fact that using it as a choice, it becomes laden with extra meaning. And I think that that's another way of when I said that it becomes a holy language for us, it's another way of looking at it, is that because it's not just regular speech to us, because we don't just come to Yiddish totally naturally, it has this extra meaning for us. It's imbued with this special quality of being a heritage language and being a language with which we can think about Jewish identity in a different way. So that has this extra quality above and beyond simply the language itself. That's this kind of post-vernacular layer. And so for me personally, I love Yiddish. I learned Yiddish, but I feel most comfortable, most authentic, so to speak, engaging with it at a little bit of a distance, not pretending that it's my mother tongue, but rather appreciating that I come to it because it's a heritage language, because it's a way of connecting with my identity and with the past. And so for me, it's really natural to think of telling the story in English about Yiddish with a Yiddish, substrate in it, with Yiddish words in it, but really from the perspective of an English speaker, because that's, how I was raised.
No.
Can I ask about the music?
Sure.
So when I heard it this time, there was a musical moment that I particularly liked, when there's Kaddish and there's in counterpoint there's I think that's the only moment like that, although I'm not sure. It was very effective, I thought. And there's no, you could have made a lot more sound Yiddishy, Jewishy. Or you could have made just the olives sound like that, or you could have, and nothing sounds like that. That was a choice, right?
Yeah. When I started setting Yiddish poetry to music, I would get this question a lot, why doesn't it sound Jewish? Because the musical language that I'm using to set poetry to music or to tell this story, it's really kind of like my own personal musical language that draws from post-minimalist music and romantic classical music and modernist classical, just drawing these different elements. Um, and what I say when people ask me that question is, just by way of example, I've also set to music poetry by Emily Dickinson, who was a great American poet. And when I set Emily Dickinson, I think when most people who set poetry by Emily Dickinson to music, I don't necessarily pull for some kind of American special sound. I wouldn't necessarily pull from Americana or from Appalachian music or anything like that. I'm simply going to use the musical language that is in my ears and in my heart to tell the story that she's telling in her poetry. And in much the same way, when I'm setting Yiddish poetry to music, or if I'm telling a story from Jewish history, I'm just trying to bring that story to life with the kind of the music that's in my heart and in my ears. Um, and, in particular here, like modernist poetry or something like that, this is a story where they are kind of existing and operating on a plane that isn't necessarily that of the kind of folksy, world that would maybe be associated with like klezmer music or with Yiddish folk song. Um, so yeah, to me it's natural to tell this story, with my own musical language and to not even not worry about it sounding kind of quote unquote Jewish. But for me, that kind of reference point, it doesn't necessarily fit this world um, of the suits and ties and the library stacks and scholarship and so on and so forth.
Yeah, Gelya.
Oh, Gil, you're muted.
First of all, I'd like to invite other people to ask questions. You don't have to be a music historian. You don't have to be a Yiddish speaker. You don't even have to be Jewish. You know, are there some more questions?
I see Terry has her hand up.
I'll take you up on that, Gelya. But also to say how wonderful this is, and thank you so much. I so much appreciate all this great whatever. And then I have a question that's actually sort of about linguistics. But maybe it's not really about linguistics. But I'm thinking about how linguistics, and specifically the issue of languages that die or are thought of as potentially dying, and what that seemed like in the middle of the 20th century, and what it looks like now when this is framed, in a more universal or universalistic way. I'm thinking especially of Native American languages and efforts of communities to rescue languages and how one thinks about that. And I'm just wondering whether this sort of methodological differences in linguistics have mean that the time of your producing this opera thinks of linguistics differently from how the story in its own time thought about linguistics.
That's such a wonderful question. I wish we had our linguist colleagues here to weigh in as well. I'll just say that I think first of all, Weinreich and Mark and their colleagues were of course acutely aware of just how much they had lost in the Holocaust, and that is why the stakes are so high for them, and that's why we felt the stakes could not be any higher in this story. This is their whole lives, their whole community. This is their whole civilization that they've watched, experience this calamity, and now they're figuring out what to do with the pieces and how to save as much as they possibly can. The question of how it's different, how Yiddish linguists or those studying Yiddish as linguists in the 1950s would compare to those studying Yiddish as linguists today. Certainly the community is very different. So, we have linguistics colleagues that are studying communities that are Yiddish-speaking communities, ultra-Orthodox communities, for example, and studying, the nuances of the Yiddish in their communities and how it compares. Thinking of one colleague in particular, Isaac Bleeman, who's a linguist. He teaches at UC Berkeley, and his dissertation was on this, comparing the Hasidic, the ultra-Orthodox community, Yiddish-speaking community, and their relationship to Yiddish, and the Yiddishist community, the secular Yiddishist community, and how they negotiate their use of Yiddish, and actually how the sounds of the language might have evolved in different ways. So certainly there's a tremendous amount of work that was done and there's still linguistics work that's being done. But I think to the other point of your question, I think our hope is that, yes, of course, this is sadly in many ways a universal story, and that we are always confronting the loss of language and languages. We had a colleague we had a conversation with, and the first thing he said was, yes, I was just reading about all these Native American languages that are being lost all the time, and that actually we can track it in real time, that there's all this linguistic diversity just here in North America, but of course elsewhere around the world, that's constantly being in danger of being lost. So that's an ongoing story, I guess, is the short answer to your question. And it's a fascinating field to see how people are working to preserve certain languages, to revive them in some instances, and what challenges they might face when they engage in language revival.
So let me follow up just a tiny bit, okay? Because one of the themes that comes up in the, as it were, debate between the Max and Udo is whether or not one should be prescriptive in one's notion of the rules. So Max gets to be the baritone because he's like the Académie Française, right?
Yeah.
No, you have to, we know it's a computer, but we have to call it an ordinateur, or it wouldn't be French enough. But that debate at that time is surely different from how in the 21st century that, I mean, it comes into the opera, and it sounds that it so smoothly communicates how the feeling of that debate, but it also with it feels like I'm sure it was a choice to make it sound like a dated debate.
Well, I mean, you'd be surprised how much this debate is actually happening quite the same way today. I mean, to like put a little bit more flesh on it, actually, like both of them were large. There are certain things that both of them were prescriptive about, actually. And so like if you really go to the history and you really kind of like go to all the details, there's a lot of stuff that they see eye to eye on. And Udall Mark was actually the editor of the Philological Journal of YIVO. And so like when he, kind of cleaved off and he had his differences of opinion that he wanted to do for his dictionary, they were really minute. But both of them, even, there was a lot of overlap. But yeah, these are very much living debates in the Yiddish community today. Especially if you go to Borough Park, or if you go to Williamsburg and you hear the Yiddish they speak there, you hear incorporated a lot of English words, but you also hear incorporated a lot of words from German, from modern German, that is, right? So for those that know, the history of Yiddish language, it of course is in the same language family as German, and but the Germanic component of Yiddish, right? Because it's written with the Hebrew alphabet and it has Hebrew and Aramaic components to it, and it has Slavic components and words from, and features from other languages. But the kind of like Germanic substrate of it broke off from German about 1,000 years ago. And the German that it broke off from was Middle High German. It wasn't modern German. So it's a different language. And for that reason, there are some false friends in Yiddish with modern German, words that, they developed in different directions over the last 1,000 years. There are some words that are in Yiddish that are from Middle High German, which aren't in modern German because, they were changed or lost in this other developmental pattern. So that's, Yiddish and German. But then on top of that, there's a layer of where Yiddish speakers and readers and writers incorporated modern German words, in the 19th century and in the 20th century into their language, because they were, because there were internationalisms, maybe some of them were bilingual, some of them were reading German, newspapers and magazines and things. And then they said, oh, this is a great word. An example of that is the word for question, Frage, because historically, Yivo used the Hebrew word shaila, which also just means question. But at a certain point, the modern German word Frage was incorporated into Yiddish as a kind of like secular question. And one linguist that I spoke to posited that it's probably because the word Frage was used in writings, in German writings, to talk about like social questions. And, in German writings that people who were also writing in Yiddish perhaps read. And so this modern German word made its way into Yiddish. And the reason we know that it was it was from the modern rather than from the Middle German is because of the vowel shifts that occurred in other words. And so if it had made its way from Middle High German, into Yiddish and into the modern day, we would expect it to sound like the word like frog instead of Frage, which is much closer to modern German. And right. So this is just like one example where we get, these different words. But I bring this up to say that there are many people in the Yiddish world back then, but also to this day, that get very exercised about modern German words being incorporated into Yiddish. Frage is one that was incorporated like relatively early on, maybe in the 18th century or the 19th century, but not 1,000 years ago, importantly. But there are other words like Beispiel, which means example. Like this is something that Ben and I know people at Evo who get exercised. If you were to say zum Beispiel, for example, in Yiddish, they would say, that's German. Don't say that. How dare you? They would say, you should say Lamoshel, which is, from Lashon Kodesh. They might seem like things have changed, but they have not.
I'll also just add quickly. Oh, sorry. Was that you, Nahma?
Oh, yeah. It was in the 19th century that Yiddish finally became a modern language, and the crusade, to use the wrong kind of association, to make it a modern language was to raise up Yiddish, to raise up Yiddish culture. It was brand new. There were no secular Yiddish printing presses allowed by the Tsar until the late 19th century, and that's part of what Weinreich. It's totally different from the French Academy, who had French. They didn't have to protect something and nurture it. And
yeah, and I'll just add briefly that just because there's a prescriptivist decree doesn't mean anyone's going to listen to it as well, because that was very much the case before World War II. You know, YIVO issued all kinds of, you know, you should say it like this, or, you know, that you should write it like that. And that's famously YIVO issued the Taconis, the rules for spelling, and it was ignored by the, you know, by large swaths of the Yiddish world, by the Yiddish press, by the, you know, all the writers, the famous writers we know and love. You know, this tension between that prescriptivism and descriptivism, you know, is one that's, I think, quite perennial. So
I think Lois is the next speaker, and you need to turn on your audio, and then Chaim.
What I hear in this debate, what I heard when I was listening to the opera, and also in this conversation about the debate, is that there seems to be another question, which is not just Udall wanting to put down what is and what was, and Weider saying what should be. And that's not a parallel discussion. That's really, I mean, you've always saying, we want to put these rules on it, even if you have a different thing over there. This is how we want to go forward. So it's, you know, constructing language going forward versus documenting what is and the variety of what is. And I see those as something that still exists. And, you know, one of the things that I was feeling listening to the opera was that I could identify with both at times. I mean, I was not one side or the other. I was definitely, they each have a point, and yet, you know, it's not, you know, two polar ends, but there's got to be some compromise if it's going to be living. Anyway, I just wanted to add that because I felt that strongly as I was listening, and also through the debate.
No, thank you. We appreciate that a lot, because I think that's what also drew us to this story, is this notion that it's really hard to, you know, who's wrong, how much prescriptivist, how much descriptive, you know, and how to grapple with the loss. So we try to pose that as questions and to animate the debate so that, you know, you as an audience can wrestle with it.
Well, that definitely came through, because that was mostly what I was grappling with as I was listening to it and hearing it. It definitely worked.
Thanks, Lois.
Chaim, I think your hand was up.
So a similar issue of the debate that I heard as a child was encapsulated in the word Deutschmerisch. Don't bring in the German, which many of us, children of survivors, took German as a, quote, easy out to learning the language of, you know, fulfilling our language requirement. And we came back speaking what we thought was something close to Yiddish, sort of a patchwork that we had created. On the other side was the very profound question of how much Hebrew snuck into contemporary Yiddish. And as I spoke to what I call survivors who had the cultural debates between the Litvak and Galicianer forms of Yiddish, there was in the beginning in the 1980s, 1990s, this reemergence of Russian into Yiddish, especially as you read the Yiddish newspapers, and so in some ways this wonderful piece that you've presented us with captures, I think, something that is profound. I have to say my sympathies are with the side of the argument that says, what are the possibilities of Yiddish? What are the words that are yet to be filled in? because I do sense that while the active speaking group are Hasidim as a general category, they, as they secularize, as they leave, which I think is a part of the process. I don't want to use the word inevitable because I'll get into a fight here. But they will leave, some of them. They will bring their Yiddish with them, and they will encounter and need those Yiddish words that are sort of waiting to be picked up for their much more sophisticated Yiddish. So I just want to stop with saying how wonderful. Thank you so much for this gift. And somehow hearing this debate encapsulated in opera and in music adds so much more depth to the descriptions and feelings that are behind remembering these conversations.
Thank you so much. Gelya?
I'd like to, again, invite people who haven't asked a question or made a comment to please do so.
Sally.
I just want to, yes, I just want to say that this was a wonderful experience for me as an opera singer and as a teacher of voice. The voices that you were able to cast were just marvelous. One of the things that I'm always aware of in seeing new operas is the unevenness of the quality of the singing. And this was all on an excellent par, all of it, and the musicians of the chamber orchestra. Because when you're in a chamber orchestra situation, you're exposed all the time. And it was so musically done, and the diction so clear. I really appreciated the translation on the screen, but sometimes I had to like really peer close to see it over the video. But it was all just marvelous, and I want to be sure that we have someone who's going to let us know about your production ongoing and keep us updated on the fundraising efforts. I know that's a huge part of it. I totally understand all the costs. You know, most people see those productions and they just don't understand how much goes into behind the scenes goes into it before it's ever actually presented to the public. So bravi to you both.
Thank you so much.
And good luck going on. And I hope this won't be the last piece that you're collaborating on either.
Thank you.
I think Leah's has her hand up.
Yeah, I didn't know quite to expect from a work entitled something like The Great Dictionary of the Yiddish Language. And so I found myself very surprisingly moved by this production for all of the reasons that were described in terms of the preservation of culture. And I'm kind of curious as to whether or not either Max or Udall were very spiritual people, since YIVO is the scientific study of Yiddish, and I'm just curious about spirituality and any sort of history of Hasidic views of language and alphabet, and whether any of this combines somehow with their scientific focus.
Sure. So they both certainly were very academic, of course, as as linguists. But it is true that Udall Mark, for example, had this kind of mystical, truly mystical, or relationship with the Yiddish language, in which he felt this divine, that words had these Laser Burko, who wrote the full story of this whole history, talks about this, that he had this connection to the language, and it is influenced by Kabbalistic thought. It's influenced by Hasidic mysticism. So he was very, very knowledgeable about so many different realms of Jewish thought, and that was a way for him to express his spirituality, was to have this very, very meaningful connection to words and to language, and to see them as these divine sparks of human, a part of the Jewish soul, or very, very human elements.
Just to dovetail on that, so to clarify what Ben's saying, Udomark wasn't himself religious, actually. He was just really interested in these ideas. And so he was a member politically of an organization called the Volkspartei, who, felt collectively that Jewish nationalism would be enriched by these elements of Jewish religious tradition, but from a kind of national perspective rather than like a kind of religious belief perspective. So that idea is part of what gave us the license to kind of set Udomark as a kind of biblical prophet, receiving prophecy from the Alephs as kind of angels, that we would use this kind of religious imagery in a secular context to kind of repurpose it, because historically Udomark was interested in that kind of idea. But yeah, these guys were very much secular. There's a story that Max Weinreich wrote the magisterial history of the Yiddish language 4-volume book. That was his kind of life's work. And there's a story that when he wrote the chapter about religious belief, he ate pork chops. And because it was so anathema to him, he was so secular, he really didn't keep kosher. It was really not, but he appreciated that it was a really important part of the language. And when you read speeches that Weinreich gave, he talks about religious stories. He talks about, that's a part of the Jewish heritage and the Jewish, cultural world that he's bringing forward in his work. And to me, it's really inspiring to think that it can be, for both of these guys, but it doesn't have to be, you don't have to kind of believe it for it to still be a part of our culture that's really valid and beautiful and like a part of what we bring forward. I think of the kind of world of this scholarship as a world which transcends these divisions. I think that sometimes in the Jewish world we can be divided between I'm Orthodox, I'm conservative, I'm Reform, I don't believe, I'm Reconstructionist. But yeah, in this world, for these of Max Weinreich and Udomark and this kind of work, it really transcends those divisions, and it says, this is all our heritage, and whether you believe it or how you believe it, it's less important.
Ruth.
I just want to thank you, Gelya, for inviting me to this. I mean, the hook was definitely the opera. I mean, I live in New York, and we go regularly to the opera. So that was a big hook, and I agree with Sally. I mean, I enjoyed the music and the performance was really great, as well as the content. I mean, I can't personally relate to Yiddish and Yiddish culture. It's not in my background, growing up, differently. But I enjoyed it, and that I may come for next time because I like the literature that I'm familiar with from school. And thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much. Please come in the fall.
Yeah.
So yes, please, Moshe.
Thank you. Just a quick question about the instrumentation. Did I see 2 violas on the left looking at it and 1 violin on the right?
I forget the arrangement of them, but it was 2 violins, 1 viola, cello, bass, and clarinet with piano.
Okay, so yeah, you had it then more or less the traditional string quartet orientation with the 2 violins on the left and the viola on. Okay, thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
let us know how we can help with fundraising, please.
Well, if you or if you know anyone that's interested in supporting this piece, please get in touch with Ben or myself, and we can tell you how you can help.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You'll leave us your contact information or through Gelya. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe you could put in the chat.
I'll go
as
ahead
well.
and do that. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm happy to be a connector. I have a question. I wonder if there's anybody else who has a comment or question that haven't spoken yet.
Hey, I'll just pop on. Hi, Mom.
Hi, honey. This is my daughter, Rebecca Shmoozamama Frank.
Hey, everybody. I haven't been super well today, so I was off camera, but when my mom said that you were coming, hi, Ben.
It's a great
to see you. Ben and I were in Lava together, so I heard some of this piece. It was an absolute honor to like hear more of it, which is why I was like, I have to come on, even if my camera's off. I just wanted to say it's so moving. The music is so stunning, and so I just wanted to, send some love your guys' way. It sounds incredible, and I'm thrilled that you guys are headed towards production. So, thanks.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Yes, good evening. And my apologies. I was very, very late in joining, but I did not want to miss this if I could help it. And just a few random comments. I've been thinking quite a bit about Yiddish lately. The fact that my grandparents spoke it a little bit. It was really the greatest honor of my life to be my grandmother's Shana Madel. And just been thinking more about, the fact that they spoke even a little bit of that with us means that obviously this was a very big part of what they were raised with and the language that they spoke in their homes. And it's quite moving. It's quite emotional, I think, for most of us due to, for personal reasons and historical reasons as well. And it truly does feel like a holy language. And it's just lovely to see it taking on new life and new form. And, just thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly that we're obviously very moved by the story as well, and for anyone who feels drawn to Yiddish or learning more, I feel like we are living in a golden age of digital resources that are available, and in fact, it's only getting better and better by the day. So there's a tremendous amount of material digitized from YIVO's archives and from other archives, and there's all kinds of PDFs you can download and programs you can watch. And so if you're concerned that you won't be able to find stuff, fret not. There's plenty of material out there, and there are classes and all kinds of activities to engage in to learn more. So thank you so much for your support.
I'd like to piggyback on that. If piggybacking is a word in Yiddish, you should tell me what it is. I've often wondered. The YIVO, of which Ben is the director of education, offers language classes every semester, and starting with Aleph Bet. And I think that Lois actually took one of those.
Yes, yeah, I did. Just finished it.
Just finished it. Wonderful.
Well, a little while ago I finished it. Yeah, it was very good. It was Josh Price was teaching it, and I definitely am going to continue.
And we'll continue to inform people about it, and hopefully we can get a little bit of momentum behind learning Abyssal Yiddish. And I have a question for Nahma in particular. First of all, I neglected, we started in, and I didn't really have a chance. Nahma is a very renowned I mean, if you say renowned, you don't have to say very. She's a renowned scholar of Yiddish. She's a translator. She's also, I believe, a librettist. I'm very much indebted to her book, Vagabond Stars, which is about Yiddish theater in Europe, and was very important to me as I was working on a draft of a novel in which there were Yiddish actors, and took me to Vilna and to Morevsky and various figures in the Vilna environment. And also has translated theatrical works, plays. If I remember correctly, God, Man, and the Devil is one of the books that you've published. And so I just would like to, before I ask my question, finish this encomium of gratitude to Nahma for your scholarship and leadership in Yiddish and Yiddishkeit. And thank you for joining us today. And now my question. So when you began translating and publishing, I imagine it was a harder road to hoe than the Yiddishists are experiencing now. And I wonder if I could ask you to reflect a little bit on the state of the union of Yiddish and Yiddish studies.
Yeah.
And
but you know, there was
culture.
one more thing I would like to say about the we've been talking about Yiddish language, and you can see in attitudes not just toward language but towards Yiddish theater that because Yiddish and the Yiddish arts are what we had, we didn't have a homeland, we had Yiddish land. That people feel and felt very strongly that if it was a trashy piece of theater, it was vulgar, it was stupid, it was that's demeaning the community, it's demeaning the language, it's demeaning the culture, it's demeaning us all. So it's the heart, you know, it's not just the takon, you know, it's everything, it's everything. When I started writing this book in 1972 or 73. And Yivo had handwritten card catalog in script, some of the cards in script. And most of the books that people read now for histories in English, well, in English certainly, had not been published. And the books that were published, well, they didn't have indexes, that's one thing. And they were spelled in all kinds of crazy ways. They were hard to read. What has not changed still, when you want to read, many Yiddish plays were published. Really, an astonishing number of plays were published. But many, even more, were not published. And if you want to read them, you have to read them scribbled in notebooks the actors used. And I guess I haven't said the main thing, the thing I should have started with first, which is that there was less respect for Yiddish. In these, it's a half a century. one of the big changes is that people find Yiddish glamorous and they find it romantic. And the shtetl where there was mud and people coughed half the year is Fiddler on the Roof country. And it is, after all, our roots. And now it's where young people go to find out who they are, especially if they're not. I myself am a Zionist, but if you're not and you want to somehow be Jewish, I think that's one of the impulses for many young people. There's a warmth. There are other novels with characters written by people they were never in a shtetl, they're too young, but they're drawn to it, and that's new. When I was applying for tenure, it's a long time ago, and I said, I'm writing a book about Yiddish theater. I had published a book about French theater, but I'm writing a book about Yiddish theater. And a guy on the committee, older than me, but Jewish, I mean, the point of this is that he was Jewish, said to me, "What's a nice girl like you writing about Yiddish?" And now it's an academic field. There's professors, my goodness. A big change. And computers. And young people acting in plays, including from people that have left who speak the new Yiddish. They speak the Haredi Yiddish nowadays, some. So there are a lot of changes.
They say when people, I've heard this, and you've probably heard this too, most of you, that when people say, well, isn't Yiddish a dying language? The answer is, yeah, Yiddish has been dying for the last 1,000 years.
Yeah, people always say that. People always say that. Well, of course. I don't know how to talk about that, but yes, people have been saying that for a long time, and Yiddish is changing, and fewer people that write literature speak Yiddish. But a lot of people speak Yiddish who don't go to theater or write novels. People don't say anymore. I used to go around giving lectures on Yiddish theater, and there was never a lecture without somebody raising his hand and saying, "It's not a language, it's a jargon. It's just a jargon," which is exactly what Evo was fighting against. Nobody talks like that anymore.
So in that sense, Max Weinreich succeeded. I mean,
yeah.
Isn't there the quote that a language is a jargon or a dialect with an army?
Yeah, language is a dialect with an army and a navy. That is something that Max Weinreich quoted. One of his students said it, and he quoted it in a talk he gave in 1945 at YIVO. And I think that the idea of YIVO in many ways is to kind of give an intellectual army to the Yiddish nation that has no government, So YIVO kind of supplied the intellectual framework that would allow them to be, a language without an army and a navy. And I think in that sense, they did achieve what they were hoping to do. Yiddish studies is a field. This dictionary is unfinished, but Max Weinreich's son Uriel did finish a dictionary. It is the modest scope that I think probably Max Weinreich wanted for this dictionary, and so instead his son went and did it. Shortly thereafter, or in the midst of Mark working on this, really. But after the first volume was created, and it's a slim volume. I mean, it's like a Merriam-Webster. You've got the important words. It's very helpful, and it was finished quickly. So that's the other side. But yeah, these there it is. That's Uriel Weinreich's dictionary.
Right.
Nothing to scoff at. Certainly an extremely helpful book. But yeah, they achieved it. I mean, we have millions of pages of archival material. Those cards that were used to create the Great Dictionary of the Yiddish Language exist. So kind of the raw material is there. If someone wanted to make this, 16-volume dictionary, they could. So they did a tremendous amount, these folks.
Oh, they could though? I mean, you've got for the other letters, they could?
Well, no, so they created a full word list, but they didn't define all of the words. But so and they actually they prepared unpublished volumes, a few more, that were recently put online, scans of Bet, Gimel, Daled, and Hey. But they're kind of in draft form. But yeah, sure. And the rest of the alphabet is there in just the words, the word lists. There's a lot of work to be done to make that into a dictionary. But especially with all the books that we have that survive, all the archival material that we have that survives, and all the technological resources that we have now, we have OCR, we have computers. You could do it. It's a tremendous amount of work, but it's possible to be done.
Although Mordechai Schechter, alav shalom, put out a dictionary just of botanical terms, because very few people grow anything speaking Yiddish, and there were words that nobody knew. I mean, nobody on the planet knew a certain kind of petal or certain kind of I don't know enough about botany, but
in some cases, he found old sources, like really old sources, a book here, a poem there that referenced, these different botanical species. And so he really did a lot of work putting that together. And then in other cases where those sources didn't exist, he used, the Latin term or whatever to create the Yiddish term. And so that lexicon of terms for botany, it's both kind of like the really hard to find terms that were out there, but also new words for the things that weren't out there. So in a way, it is of that spirit of like creating the resources for the Yiddish botanists of the future.
How big a book is it? I mean, now it's not as thick as that dictionary. Well, obviously.
No, I don't. It's like this. I don't know. I could probably find out. Hold on, I'll look it up.
Pretty slim volume while Alex is looking that up. But also, I'll just add briefly, it's another example of, dictionary as cultural activism, because one of the stories we heard was that someone made some, like those comments you heard, Nahma, someone made some comment to Mordechai.
Yeah.
Oh, there aren't names for plants in Yiddish, or like, Jews weren't connected to nature, or something like that. And he said, no, there's plenty, and I'm going to prove it to you. And so as a way of, I'm paraphrasing the story a bit, but that's the story, that's sort of the myth, the legend we heard. And I think there is a lot of truth to it, that there's a lot you really can. I mean, these were also Mordechai Schechter is an astonishingly brilliant and erudite linguist, but there's really a tremendous amount you can do at any time if you set your mind to it and you have the training and you make the effort to engage with this material. And what Alex was saying about the fifth and sixth volume. So first of all, the joke is always Yudelmark, he got through the first 4 volumes. He only covered Aleph, and it took him 25 years, and then he died. So, everyone kind of the initial reaction is to laugh from that and go, "Oh, he only got through Aleph. That's really not very much." But it's actually a tremendous amount of material, and those 4 volumes are, on my bookshelf in the office. They're quite sizable, and it really is a monumental achievement for all the moments in the opera where he's being made fun of for being disorganized and can't get it together. He actually did accomplish a lot, as did Weinreich, as did Mordechai Schechter. And so, with the new technology we have, there are things that, the new English Yiddish dictionary that is based on Mordechai Schechter's work, that Gittel Vishnu put out. That is now online on a website, and that's not something that, just as the Bachner dictionary is also online as Wörterbuch.org. So we have these 2 wonderful online dictionaries. We use them all the time. Yiddish students are using them all the time, and we can find words way faster than, as much fun as it is to go through the hard copy, you can find it much faster with the digital website version. And so I think that things like that really lend, to me at least, a lot of hope for all the work and all the material we're going to be able to generate in the future.
And the National Yiddish Book Center, you can get books online, you can get plays online, you could
spend
that's a
pretty
gift
much
to the world. Didn't used to exist. You can just read them. You don't have to go looking for them.
You
and
can
not
spend
find
probably
them.
thousands of hours listening to native Yiddish speakers and audio recordings, just from the material online.
Would you, I realize that we're creeping up to the end of our second hour, and this is the longest session we've ever had, and people are still talking. So I'm very, very grateful and happy about it. I have more questions and thoughts, but maybe the most merciful thing would be to allow people to end the session.
Well, Gelya, thank you so much for having us. This has been really a pleasure to share
Thank you, Gelya.
Everyone, and to get a chance to meet all of you just briefly. But Ben and I both put our emails in the chat. Please be in touch with us if you'd like to, stay in the loop of this piece.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. I also just want to echo from both of us another thank you to Nahma as well, for your work has helped us so much, and it's just wonderful to be able to chat with you here. And thank you, Gelya, and thank everyone in the Yiddish Shmoozers community.
Thank you, Alex, Ben, Nahma, and everyone who came. Thank you so much.